Our next speaker is Rob Hahn, who's the founder and CEO of Decenter Property Exchange, DPX, an online auction-based MLS, and also is the managing partner of 7DS Associates, a strategy consulting firm specializing in the residential real estate industry. He previously worked at how does one say this? Realogy? Realogy, okay. Where he headed interactive marketing for Coldwell Banker Commercial, often called the best demotivational speaker in real estate. I'm just thinking what demotivational means. I got to tell you, I will use it at least 12 times this week and forever. In real estate, he's a frequent speaker at industry events. He writes the well-known blog, wasn't known to me, but it is now, Notorious ROB. That is great. On topics in real estate, technology, law, and more, and is the co-host of the influential Industry Relations podcast with Greg Robertson. He's been named to the Inman 100 Most Influential list. People in real estate. He has a BA from Yale, a JD from NYU, lives in Las Vegas with his lovely wife, Sunny, and 2 misbehaving dogs. Dogs are going to be a theme going forward.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to Professor Cox. Thank you to the University of Minnesota for hosting this. Most of the time when I speak, I'm quite clearly the most radical person speaking that day, hence the name Notorious. I often warn people. I think today that I don't have to worry about that because I get to follow Jack Ryan. So I'm supposed to represent the industry's perspective. I actually thought I don't need to do any of this because actually Professor Barry just did a phenomenal job of just laying everything out. But you know what? I have pretty pictures. So I figured let's just go through it and talk about it. So I call this the truth about the NAR settlement. And I'm going to sort of talk about and focus a little bit more on how the real estate industry will respond to these things. So what does the NAR settlement actually do? Right? There's been a lot of talk, a lot of written, a lot of gurus talking about it, myself included. But if we really look at what does the settlement actually do, it does 3 things. 1, no more office compensation on the MLS. 2, requires buyer broker agreements. 3, seller disclosure regarding commissions. There's a little bit more, in the settlement that says the listing agent has to explain to the seller, all this negotiable, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Here's the thing though. As Professor Barry's pointed out, as others have pointed out, this settlement specifically allows for the offer of compensation. Specifically allows it. So, and I've pulled up language and we could go through it. I don't think we actually need to, so I'm probably not going to read all the language about it. But yeah, as long as such concession, not limited to condition, et cetera, but it specifically allows for the offer of compensation. So nothing really changes on the compensation front. What about the buyer broker agreement, right? And by the way, I'm saying all these things not because I'm like, oh, yay, this is great. This is just a reality of it, right? The buyer broker agreement, a lot of folks are counting on this to effect some sort of change slowly in the marketplace. I think no such thing will happen, unfortunately. Why? The buyers will reject current versions of the buyer broker agreements that are sort of out there in the marketplace today. There are a number of states that require written buyer broker agreements today. I don't know if Minnesota is one of them. I'm pretty sure Washington is. Minnesota is one of them that requires it. And a lot of them look something like this, right? And again, sorry, you can't really read it. But basically what it does is it makes the buyer get on the hook for any unpaid compensation. So in other words, if the seller doesn't offer enough, then you're going to agree to pay me X, Y, Z, and I'm going to get on the hook. And I think the concept here is now that this will be required for all realtors, all buyer agents, before a tour, the buyer's going to sit down with the buyer agent and have this conversation, this negotiation, right? I don't think that's going to happen. And here's why. Because this is the Colorado buyer broker agreement, which is written by the state of Colorado, not by the realtor associations, which is a whole other topic. The fact that most of these buyer forms are created typically by the state realtor associations and written for the benefit of the realtor members. In this case, the Colorado state was written by the actual state. And it actually has this very interesting clause, 7.33. Listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, buyer is not obligated to pay. So if there's a shortfall, the buyer is not going to be on the hook for it. What I believe is by the time July rolls around, when the industry will have gone out, because it's already happening, brokers and agents are out there already trying to get buyers to sign buyer agents agreements. And what they're getting is a whole lot of no. Whole lot of no, I'm not, you know what, I'm not going to put myself on the hook for $25,000. Yes, I know you told me the buyer's going, we're going to seek this from the seller in some fashion. I'm just not going to do it. And I think what we'll eventually see is that this type of buyer broker agreement is the one that buyers will actually sign. Because in my opinion, no buyer in his right mind will ever put him on the hook for any kind of money at a time when I'm like literally emptying my 401k in order to make a down payment. And these types of buyer agreements are actually 100% contemplated within the rules, because here's what it says. Here's what the paragraph 58.6 specify: conspicuous disclose the amount or rate of compensation it will receive, how this amount will be determined. And as Professor Barry talked about, such realtor participant may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount. In other words, buyer broker agreements that specify the amount, like 3%, but buyer's not responsible. Therefore, the amount could be less than 3%, 100% within the rules, right? 100%. So I think that's what we're going to see. This, of course, would be a problem for the buyer agents because now they're taking on all of the risk. What happens if the seller doesn't offer compensation? What happens if the seller's not going to pay me? If only there were some way of finding out what the compensation offered on a property might be, especially since these rules make it clear that compensation can no longer be put into the MLS. Well, as it turns out, since offers of compensation are permitted, and they are specifically permitted on broker websites, a realtor or realtor MLS participant displaying both one, data or data feeds from a realtor MLS, and two, offers of compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives, but only on listings from their own brokerage. I guess. And if this were back in 1965, when everything was printed books, this might be some sort of a barrier. Sadly, we are in 2024. And on March 16th, the day after this settlement was, made in the news, I got phone calls from 3 separate entrepreneurs in our space saying, I could write a little bot that could scrape all the broker websites. This wouldn't be hard. I'm like, yeah, you're exactly right. Because brokerage and agent websites will actually be able to display compensation they are offering on their own listings. One of the things I think about is if you're allowed to display compensation on your own listings, are you allowed to know what the compensation is on other brokers' listings, even if you don't display it? I think the answer is yes. How can you prevent someone from knowing what the compensation offered is? Which then leads to, given that it's 2024, it's just a matter of time, guys, before we see something like this, right? We don't need, like Zillow, Realtor.com, the MLS, they can't display compensation. Fine. It would not be hard for some smart entrepreneur in the next week or two to come out with, hey, Siri, what's the compensation offer in this house? Nothing in the rules prohibit this. And as a matter of fact, here is version 1.0 of Verified Commissions, a website that is now live and in production, version 1.0. Largest database, 288,553 active listings with verified compensation. Just go in and type in, and it will tell you what the compensation offered is. This is how the industry will react. This is how quickly we are going to respond to this, because we see what the rules are. And to quote Kevin Sears again, if there's one thing I know about members, they will figure out how to efficiently communicate the information to see if there will be any cooperating compensation. Absolutely, President Sears is 100% right. This is going to happen. This is not a question. This is not an if. This is a when. It's already happening as I speak. So we have to then ask, why in the world would sellers actually offer compensation, right? Anna sort of spoke about this, like, why not opt out? Why not negotiate? Why not say, hey, you know what? I read the stories. I don't have to pay 6%. It's crazy. Listing agent comes in, hey, here's blah, 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 this and that and the other thing. Why in the world would I ever agree to offer compensation? Why would I agree to 6% commissions and half of it being given away? The answer, of course, is very simple. And I won't speak about it. I will have he swears he's not a spokesperson, but this is from a recent local TV appearance.
If I was a home seller, I strongly recommend to all home sellers to still have a willingness to offer compensation to a buyer's brokerage, to the agent that brings the buyer. And if you're not willing to do that, if you take a hard stance and you believe these faulty news reports that say a seller shouldn't have to pay, that's okay. You can do that. But let's see how many buyers show up to your home. You're going to eliminate the buyer pool, eliminate a lot of people from your buyer pool.
So this is, to me, it's just basic like economic logic. So it doesn't matter who you are. You could be like, no, hell no, I'm not paying this. This is ridiculous. The listing agent doing her job, by the way, not trying to maintain some evil conspiracy. The listing agent is my fiduciary. Listing agent's job is to sell my house for the highest amount of money in the shortest period of time. That listing agent is duty bound to tell me, listen, Rob, if you don't do this, you are shrinking the buyer pool. The buyer agents will steer people away from you in all the various ways that we already just went over. So of course I'm going to offer compensation because sure, unless I'm like an activist, right? And unless I don't care that I'm not going to make as much money, 99% of sellers, it's like, it's just about me. It's just about making money. Sure, offer, who cares, right? So this is going to happen. So let's talk about the seller disclosure requirement. Well, such disclosure must be in writing, provided in advance of any payment. You got to specify the amount of rate, I guess, right? And this is like, we're making this like this is some sort of a new settlement agreement. Here's the deal. This is, again, well, let's use Colorado again. So we're not looking at something crafted by realtor associations. Colorado exclusive right to sell agreement specifically says this, 7.1 amount. In consideration service to be performed, seller agrees to pay brokerage firm as follows, sales commission 1 blank %. It's going to be 6 or 5.5 or whatever the prevailing rate is today, or to X in US dollars. No one ever uses this. I've never seen that being used in 13 years of consulting in this industry. That is definite. It's certain. I mean, what's the language? In writing, it's in writing. Provide in advance. It's provided in advance. Specify the amount of rate. It specifies the amount of rate. This will absolutely pass muster. Because turns out what this settlement does is steering is very much alive and kicking, right? And as Professor Barry pointed out, steering is at the heart of this. And until you do something about that, nothing changes. The industry will react. We will find ways around it. As long as steering is maintained, as steering is possible, nothing else is going to change. And that's the bad news for a reformer. It's good news if you're not, but that's the reality of it. So, given that, what exactly is the future of buyer agent compensation? Well, I think it's going to be pretty much the same as the current way of compensation. And I really mean this. I literally think nothing changes because of this settlement. I don't think the percentage goes down. Number of realtors don't change. The types of forms might change a little bit, like we talked about, but the end result will be identical to what we have today. And even better, potentially for the industry, this whole push that's been the last couple of weeks, the idea that you should use the concessions field, like the seller concessions. Don't do compensation, use that. You'll offer 0, and then during the negotiation process, seller will make a concession that includes the ability to pay the buyer. I think that will become a fallback position. Meaning, as a buyer agent, I'm going to go into verified commissions or ask Siri or whatever, find out what the compensation offer. This is not a concession. This is from the broker to my broker, what that offering is. If it's 0, I may still show that house and say to my client, hey, I'm going to show you this house. We're going to go through it all. But so you know, when we make an offer on this house, we're going to write in 2.5% for you to pay me. So the concessions field, the whole scheme becomes a fallback in the event the compensation is not offered. I think this is the way we'll actually end up seeing it happen in the next 2 to 3 months, right? There is some question as to, okay, well, that's neat, Rob, but how exactly will these compensation agreements be enforced, given that the MLS has always been the mechanism for enforcing these unilateral offers of compensation? It can't be on the MLS. How's it going to be enforced? And my answer is, number one, any of these sort of off MLS compensation networks, they're going to have the exact same power as the MLS to enforce agreements on their members. We're all, it's all network effect driven anyway. But even more importantly, within the industry, and I'm sort of glad that Jack is here and you could sort of speak to this as well. There's a whole lot of stuff, as Professor Barry said, the norms are important. So,
sick of your company.
That realtor was so mad at these guys.
And I don't give a what happens to your company. I hope it burns. And the thing is, it will. I don't even have to hope for it.
Okay.
Your business model sucks.
So that call was not unique. No.
You are just a smug little aren't you? No wonder you work for Trey Laura.
Trey Laura is a real estate company no longer automatically paying brokers a customary 2.8% commissions. Instead, consumers pay.
I'm sure Jack has a bunch of those tapes as well. You know, but that video I think was from 2015. Point there is there's a whole lot of informal networks, informal ways of enforcing the industry norms in the real estate industry. And what, you know, the news story, they later go on, it's talking about like bricks through windows and such. I'm not saying it's necessarily bricks through windows, but if you're just a working realtor out there and you show up at some event and everybody, like everyone you run into is like, you're just a smug little shit, aren't you? Like, that's not pleasant. Right? There are ways that the real estate industry will absolutely enforce off MLS compensation schemes. We just don't know what those look like today. So when I say meet the new compensation, same as the old compensation, because I literally believe nothing will change as a result of this. Now, could other things happen? Sure. Maybe we'll talk about that during the panel Q&A, but that's my interpretation of where things are. Of course, for all of us who want to see reform, and I count myself in that number because I see some real issues within the industry that has to do with this, I think this leaves us all feeling a little bit like this.